The American West has always been a very popular subject with Americans. It's really captured the spirit and the imagination of folks when you think about pioneers and settlers heading out west, going into new territory, establishing homesteads and finding new lands to settle and hopefully make it. And, you know, I even grew up watching old Western TV shows and movies from the 1950s and 60s. Thanks a lot to my dad. And I'm sure a lot of you also, you know, grew up watching Westerns, and it was a big part of American culture, not just in TV and movies, but again, just kind of an American thought, the American psyche, and when people think about, you know, the American spirit, like I said. So today we're actually going to be going through the deserts of Southern California in search of some of the old stagecoach stops. Now, these were primarily built along the Butterfield stage line, which existed from 1858 until 1861. Really not even 3 years. And this was the southern route, which was established and known as the Oxbow route because it curved south from St. Louis, also had a station that started in Memphis, and it curved south through the American Southwest, skirting south of the Rocky Mountains. Now, this was to avoid the arduous terrain of the Rocky Mountains, but also those, you know, the heavy snowfalls that came in the winter. So this route, again, lasted just under 3 years, but was an important part of the American West and American Western history. Today I'll be exploring a few sites that are associated with the Butterfield stage line. Now, this was a route that existed from 1858 until 1861 and primarily served as a route for the overland mail to travel from around St. Louis, Missouri, also had a starting point in Memphis, all the way to San Francisco, California, and stretching over 2,800 miles. Now, the Butterfield stage route was named for a New York businessman known as John Butterfield, who ended up getting the contract from the United States government to establish a much faster route. Now, originally it took probably on average around 50 to 52 days or so for mail to get from around St. Louis to San Francisco. And Mr. Butterfield believed that he could do it through the southern route and setting up stagecoach stops appropriately in about 25 days. And he actually proved to be right, and he was able to do so. So today these stagecoach stops exist anywhere between 10 to 20 miles apart, in some cases a little bit further. But again, they're kind of some cool sites that we're able to see that are old relics of the West, and you can actually see, lay your hands on. And in some cases, there are actual stagecoach buildings and stops that you can see. In other cases, it's just a historic marker showing where it once was. But either way, a lot of cool stuff out there to check out. So let's come along and start the journey. Thought I'd start my journey here at the Vallecito stage station. Now here, there's actually a reconstruction, which was built in 1934, of a Vallecito stage station. And it's right here at the edge of the Great Colorado Desert. It was originally built in 1852, and it says this is an important stop on the first official transcontinental route serving the San Diego-San Antonio, known as the Jackass Mail Route, from 1857 to 1859. And then, of course, the Butterfield Overland Stage Line and the Southern Immigrant Route, which took caravans across and through the desert. And back here, you can actually see the adobe structure. Again, rebuilt in 1934. But built very similar to what it would have looked like back in the 1850s. So, you know, not much here to see, but when you're on a stagecoach and you've been on one for days at a time, or even just a day really, with how arduous that travel was and how hot it was, you would have been pretty excited to finally see these stagecoach stops, because it gave you a chance for rest, hopefully some fresh water, food, and you knew it was a chance to basically get out of that bouncing wagon or stagecoach and yeah, just kind of take a break for a little bit. And here's another view of that reconstructed stagecoach stop. And yeah, it's, I mean, pretty simple structure, but again, this would have been a sight for sore eyes as you're coming down that trail and through the valleys and through the deserts. And it's pretty hot, pretty dry out here already, and it's still pretty early in the morning, so I can only imagine what it's going to be like midday when it's climbing well into the 90s and the hundreds. And here, I'll see if I can adjust the lighting a little bit. Looks like there's actually a plaque here on the door says Vallecito Stage Station, dedicated to the memory of James E. Birch, the man who put an empire on wheels. Founder and proprietor of the first official transcontinental overland mail stage line in the United States, the San Antonio-San Diego Overland Mail of 1857 to 1861. And I'm still here at the Vallecito stage stop, and there's actually a small cemetery where 3 people are buried. And it's pretty interesting. This first one here was a man named John Hart, who died at 31 on March 16, 1867. And it says, "Beloved in life, treasured in death, blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God." And there off on the far left is the grave of James E. Mason, who is considered a native son and a U.S. land patentee in this area, who died in 1931. But the interesting gravesite is actually here in the middle. This is known as the grave for the White Lady of Vallecito. And as the story goes, back in the 1800s, she actually died while journeying west along this trail and was buried here. And this site is actually also a campground, open to the public. And of course, with any story from the 1800s, it is believed that her ghost still walks these areas in these deserts and valleys, and many people claim to have seen the ghost of the White Lady here on these grounds. All right, I just left the Vallecito Butterfield stage stop, and it's so hot out. Just to give you an idea, it's 9:30 in the morning, and it's already 98 degrees out. So my camera actually overheated a few times, and didn't get to exactly film all that I wanted, but that's okay. Just kind of reality of the situation and going on this little road trip. But I was also stopped because I guess the campground that's there, which includes the park, is closed June, July, and August just due to the heat, which makes sense. I mean, camping out in 100-degree heat really doesn't sound nice, but they were really nice. They let me kind of hang out, take a few videos with what I could. But yeah, either way, we're going to continue on, and hopefully my camera makes it through this journey. So I'm here at the next stop at Box Canyon Stagecoach stop, and already struck by the difference in terrain we're seeing here. If you've ever seen the Disney movie Cars, kind of the windy roads to get up here reminded me a lot of the movie Cars. So, but yeah, it's again very desolate. You get the cactus, the kind of dusty, deserty feel. I mean, that's what it is. We're kind of a little bit more into the hills here, but yeah, it's just amazing to kind of picture or imagine a stagecoach going down this road back in the 1800s is just wild. But one interesting thing I did learn is that if you were going to take this stage ride from St. Louis to San Francisco along the Butterfield Stage Route, it would have cost you about $200 back then, which is a sizable sum of money. And you're only allowed to take up to 25 pounds worth of baggage and your canteen and a few other, kind of light items. And it makes me laugh when you think about today how much people complain about the weight limits for what they can bring on flights. And back then, going across halfway across the country by stagecoach, you can only bring up to 25 pounds worth of stuff. I'm not sure most people today would have survived back in the 19th century, especially by stage route. So pretty fascinating to think about. This here is the historic marker for the Box Canyon Stagecoach stop. And it reads here, "The old way, variously known as Sonora, Colorado River, or Southern Immigrant Trail, and later as Butterfield Overland Mail Route, traversed Box Canyon just east of here. January 19th, 1847, the Mormon Battalion, under command of Lieutenant Colonel Philip St. G. Cook, using hand tools, hewed a passage through the rocky walls of the narrow gorge for their wagons and opened the first road into Southern California." And that is such a wild thought, to just picture men literally with hand tools carving out a way for their wagons to pass through some of these, some of these valleys or gorges or mountain passes, or what they would become as mountain passes. Hardy folk back then, and they did what they needed to do. All right, now I'm at the San Felipe Stagecoach stop, which is located in the San Felipe Valley. And this is actually one of the more, desolate ones so far. It's kind of not a lot out here, but what's neat is they do have some cool signs. Talk a little bit about the nature around here, the wildlife, things of that nature. And here it talks about some of the migrations. So located in San Felipe Valley, Huinelche is a land of crossing and travel. It says the Camilla branch of the Kumeyaay traveled here following an important trail and trade route. And again, we see how a lot of the Native American tribes around here already had well-established routes and trails through this area that were also used by pioneers and settlers heading west, and then again portions of the Butterfield Stage Route also utilized and incorporated parts of these trails. It's also an important reminder that there are a lot of Native American tribes that have called this area and land home for a very long time, and to this day, you'll notice as you're driving around, you'll pass through and near multiple reservations that still exist to this day. And right up this pathway, it looks like, is the marker for the San Felipe Stagecoach stop. So we're gonna go ahead and climb up here and check it out. Wow. And I really cannot overstate the beauty of these views up here. Again, still at the San Felipe station. And it's kind of cool getting to walk up this hill to find the marker, but this one just discusses that here the southern trail of explorers, trappers, soldiers, and immigrants crossed ancient trade routes. And again, we see both the military use of this route and the fact that, again, Native American groups have been living in this area for a while, also used this trail, lived on this land. And yeah, it just goes into the history of Southern California is really beautiful, and it is very diverse, and it's certainly not a perfect history. There was a lot of violence, a lot of hate, and a lot of terrible things that happened, but there was also a lot of hope and a lot of working together and a lot of amazing things that did happen here. So driving down these roads and getting to explore portions of the Butterfield Stage Route from the 1850s and 1860s has been pretty neat. Again, just to kind of learn some of that history and realize, you know, that diversity that makes up Southern California and these areas around here, far away from the cities especially, are really important. I'm driving to the next Stagecoach stop, but I just wanted to take a moment to get out of the car and, again, just kind of appreciate the geography here. And, you know, you look at some of these, you know, mountains, low hills, things like that, and it kind of gives you an appreciation for why they chose this route. Because while these mountains seem pretty high, and some of them are, you know, cutting straight across from like Missouri over to San Francisco or Sacramento across the Rockies really was quite a feat. And to see this and realize, you know, how much better this terrain is. I'm sure it's hot, it's dry, but you don't get those heavy snowfalls. Obviously, you don't need to figure out pathways through steep mountains and mountain passes and things like that. So it is kind of neat just to be able to stop out here and, you know, again, kind of appreciate the geography and realize that, you know, this Oxbow route, heading that southern route, really did make a lot of sense. All right, now I'm at the Warner-Carrillo Ranch House, which is one of the Butterfield Stagecoach stops. And this adobe structure was built in 1857 and really is a cool example of that blend of kind of American pioneer frontier architecture blended with Mexican culture and architecture. It's a popular site to visit. It is open to the public, usually on weekends, I believe, from about noon to 4. But it's a cool stop if you're heading up to Julian or kind of anywhere near Julian and some of those more popular places to visit. This really isn't too far, so definitely worth the stop. So let's go check it out. So this white adobe structure here is the actual Warner-Carrillo Ranch House. Again, this was one of the Stagecoach stops. And we're just going to kind of walk back here. It looks like they have some historic markers, but yeah, as you can see there in the sign, it looks like it's open Saturdays and Sundays, 12 to 4. And here we have the main sign for the Warner Ranch House. And it says, in 1844, Governor Manuel Michoacana, probably butchered that, granted 44,322 acres to Juan Jose Warner, who built this house. General Kearney passed here in 1846, the Mormon Battalion in 1847. First Butterfield stage stopped at this ranch on October 6, 1858, en route from Tipton, Missouri to San Francisco, 2,600 miles, time 24 days. This was the southern overland route into California. Well, I knew I wasn't going to be able to go inside today, but it's kind of interesting to see the sign here that says, closed due to excessive heat warning. And, you know, another good reminder when you're out here in these kind of desert environments, you know, between the snakes and the excessive heat, you really got to be careful. Make sure you're bringing extra water. And, you know, this is 2024 and the Stagecoach stop is closed. Now imagine the 1850s when, you know, you didn't know where that next stage stop might be for yourself, or, you know, when the next chance you would have for getting food or fresh water. So, you know, funny to kind of think about and complain about that today when, you know, you think about what our ancestors and those pioneersmen and, you know, everybody that traveled this route and other routes throughout the American West, what they went through. So I'm here at the Oak Grove Stagecoach Station, and this is one of the few where, you know, the building itself, the actual station, is still standing. And this was built in 1858, and today it looks like it's locked. It's usually kind of open weekends and holidays at 9, so maybe it'll be opening soon. But here you see the actual original building, which is pretty cool. And looks like it's just kind of generally open to the public, the grounds. But I like over there, you can't really see it, there's a sign that has some different rules, but it says, "But if you're drinking from a bottle, pass it around. It is the only polite thing to do. Be sure to procure all stimulants before leaving Dodge City or Fort Elliott or stage station for the ranch. Whiskey is not nectar. And don't smoke a strong cigar or pipe on the stage, especially when women or children are present." And this here is the Oak Grove Stage Station. And it reads, "Occupied in 1858 by Warren Hall, Division Superintendent Butterfield Overland Mail, which operated between San Francisco and the eastern terminus, St. Louis and Memphis, from September 15th, 1858 to March 2nd, 1861. The first mail stage from the east driven from Fort Yuma by Warren Hall and Jacob Bergman passed here on October 6th, 1858. It's just right here along the side of the road, and it's a pretty quiet day so far, but oftentimes you get the cars flying by that, you know, I'm sure most, if not all, just kind of drive by and don't even realize that they're passing down a historic route. But it's pretty cool. It's cool to be able to stop, take in the scenery, listen to the birds, see a lot of the horses and other livestock that people have, and, you know, just kind of slow down. You think of the busyness of California, Los Angeles, San Diego, San Francisco, all these cities, and to be able to come out here to the countryside and, you know, just kind of stop for a moment, take it all in. It's pretty serene. It's really nice. It's beautiful. It's a cool way to recall and remember the Old West and all those pioneers and folks who came before us. All right, I'm gonna finish up my time on this journey at the Aguanga Butterfield Overland Mail Station. And, you know, they have this little marker here, which goes into some of the history. It says from 1858 to 1861, the first Western coach passed the swing station here on October 6th, 1858. And it goes on to a little bit more of the history, but this whole area, like a lot of these areas, was a ranch. You know, we're talking tens of thousands of acres. And, you know, these routes that were, as mentioned, kind of already incorporating some older trails and things that have been here, passed through a lot of these ranches. So you often found that these ranch owners or just nearby folks ended up becoming the managers or, you know, kind of the caretakers for these stagecoach stops. And looking over here, I believe this is actually the original building. And it is in very rough shape, kind of in arrested decay. Nature's just sort of taken over. But it really is amazing to see one of these original structures just out here in the middle of a field where you can come out and explore it and check it out. So we're going to go do that just now. Now this is amazing just to see this old stagecoach station just sitting out here in a field with the wind, the rain when it does come in the winter, and the sun just kind of taking its toll on it as nature's taken over. And we're going to go ahead and walk in there for a little bit. Again, it's just kind of abandoned, and you're able to check it out. Okay, here we are walking through the Aguanga Butterfield Stagecoach Station, and yeah, you can just kind of walk in. It's completely abandoned. You can tell some other folks have been here, some of the graffiti, but it is in pretty rough shape. I'm sure animals and everything in between have been back here, but you know, you can see the ceiling and everything's kind of fully collapsed and falling down. But this is neat. It's kind of wild to be able to just step into an old structure like this out here again in the middle of a field, and to think that, you know, that many years ago this was once a stagecoach stop. And you can see these wider planks of wood and things they would have used to kind of build it. And some of the old nail heads up here. This is pretty wild. And there's a couple rooms you can go through. I'm gonna try and watch where I step here. Old hangers hanging up. And I think one of the coolest things about this so far is you can actually see some of the original paint color. And this room is a light blue color. Back here you can kind of see it's like a peach, or maybe it was once a red color, or even pink. And yeah, the back end of this thing is completely collapsed and fallen through. I guess this would have at one point been an old closet, but yeah, pretty amazing. Just to be able to, like I said, walk through this old structure, to think all the people who once lived here, and all the people that once stopped here as well. All right, this is where this journey ends here at the Aguanga Butterfield Stagecoach Station, and perhaps this is one of the best places to stop, because we have this, you know, the old building from the 1850s that's still standing here in this field and just kind of decaying slowly over time. And much like the history of the Old West, you know, there's remnants of it here or there, and this is a perfect example of it. But, you know, just kind of erodes out here in the heat and in the dust, and, you know, just kind of abandoned. It's just, I guess, kind of a good symbol for the history of the Butterfield Overland Stage Trail, which only lasted, like I said, not even 3 years. So it's been pretty cool, though, driving down roads that stagecoaches once passed down, and, you know, just seeing some of the historic markers and historic buildings and structures like this that are just still sitting here. And, you know, just encourage you to head out. There's a lot of history out there. And if you ever end up in Southern California, this is kind of a unique trip to take. You know, leave it to me to do it during the hottest time of the year, but it was worth it. It was very cool. I definitely learned a lot about the Old West, about American history, and some of the stuff and the different cultures and people that were out here and are still out here. So, and well, that's it for this trip. So now it's on to the next journey.